In these cases, it is typical for the evil spirit to cause regret and sadness. So regret and sadness meaning I'm regretting that I'm getting rid of all these things because I don't necessarily, if we actually saw, if we could see completely what good we are aiming for, like heaven, eternal beatitude in God, like if we actually saw that, it didn't take faith, we would be easily be able to, like we wouldn't even have a choice. It would be like, of course, this is what my will knows is the ultimate good. Like, I love this. This is the most delight. This is what is total fulfillment. This is what I love most of all. But it takes faith here below. And so that's the battle. The devil's going to try to make you regret and be like, is this really worth giving up all these other things to go through a lot of times periods of loneliness, especially in the beginning stages where you're detaching from certain occasions of sin or occasions of worldliness? And this happens at different levels of the spiritual life, because in the beginning it's often like maybe you had a group of friends that were committing a lot of mortal sins, okay, and they habitually, like, they embrace that lifestyle. But then later on, when you're okay, now you've lived, you have the kind of pious coating on and you're living the pious life, but then you even realize there's a lot of people who have the pious coating, but they're not really, like, they're culturally Catholic, but they're not really coming to know God in a deep way in the interior life where they see his activity and his providence and his mercy and his grace in a very personal way. And you start to live that way, and other people start to see you weird, see you as weird. You're different. Why are you being like, I know who you are. You're not that, and that really gets to us. You want to call it self-esteem, you call it your identity, you call it whatever you want to call that. That gets to the core of who we are. And when we have others say that, when we have the devil plant those ideas of you're not that, don't try to act like you're that way. You're never going to get there. You're giving up all these other things. That good is not real. All these different things, it creates regret and sadness, and he'll use fallacious reasoning, false reasonings, meaning he'll put things in your mind that don't actually make sense. Like, well, I can still go to heaven and do all these things, and it really doesn't matter. I can just do that later. It's no big deal. Or I know that this is wrong, but right now it's right because I'm justifying in these different ways.
Or one of my favorite fallacious reasonings, everybody goes to heaven, except, those really, really, really bad people like, I don't know, Stalin or something, Hitler. And so then that's a fallacious reasoning. Since everybody goes to heaven, it doesn't really matter what I do right now. It doesn't really matter if I commit this or that sin. So a lot of times that fallacious reasoning is also based on just errors, false doctrine on heresies. And anything that you kind of deduce from a heresy is gonna lead you astray. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then in terms of like causing sadness, I think it's especially discouragements like God abandoned me. God is not here with me. I'm doing a bunch of things wrong in this path. Anything that you can think of that would make you lose courage in fighting this battle. The devil will plant certain things in your head. And that's why making acts of faith, hope, and love, especially in those times of desolation, are so key, because those ward off, even if you don't know what exactly the problem is, those ward off almost all of those false reasonings, acts of faith, hope, and love, and humility and contrition, because it puts us in the proper orientation with God. Whereas if you're thinking, well, maybe God's not real, or I will never find actual happiness with God, or he'll never actually forgive me, or I'm never going to be able to get over these sins. He'll give partial truths, because like that in a way is true if it's just you. But that's where acts of faith and hope come in, because you realize your hope isn't in yourself, but it's in him, in his grace, and your cooperation with that. And that hope inevitably then gives you courage, because you realize that the end is actually possible. Anyway, that's what I have to say about, the end of this. It says, use fallacious arguments to disturb them and impede their progress. All of this is oriented toward the devil just doing whatever he can to get you away from God, anything but God, as your ultimate end, your ultimate intention, your ultimate love. And so, anyway, that's what I have to say on this first part. Basically, the devil is going to try to discourage you.
Yeah, I mean, I might just add, for those who like little lists, I'm one of those guys who likes bullet points. They help me sort of organize my thoughts. So I'm reading this great book. It's a commentary on these Discerning for Spirits by Father Bachel. And he says that there's 6 characteristics that you can learn to identify, like odors. that will reveal the evil spirit. And interestingly, each of these six is then sort of opposed by, countered by a good thing that the good angel's doing. So those six, you've already touched on them, and they're in this rule that St. Ignatius gives us are sadness, regret, impediments, disturbance, the fallacious reasoning, and discouragement. And then they're opposed by sadness, opposed by consolations, regret, opposed by repentance and true tears, impediments is opposed by strength, disturbance is opposed by peace, fallacious reasoning opposed by inspiration, and discouragement opposed by courage. Which I think you've touched on just about all of those, Kevin. We can certainly give some examples. One of the things that really impacted me on one of the retreats I first went when I was learning about this, is how the devil is always sad. He can't help it. It's his very nature to be sad because he lacks God. He lacks the joy of God. And so anytime the devil will come near you and he's trying to hang around you to tempt you, his sadness comes with him. It's just like an aura. I think we all know this. Sometimes you might be around a person who's just like happy and their happiness is infectious, right? And you see them and they got this great smile and they're full of joy. And you might have been a little down, but you get near them and they're just so happy that before you know it, you're smiling and you're happy as well. Well, so we understand that in just normal human interactions that happens to us. Well, the devil, he's a person, he's an angelic person, and he's always sad. And so when he gets near you, he can't help but sort of like impart that sadness to you. And so then you start feeling sad. A priest distinguishes for me. He said, obviously there are times you're going to be sad. I mean, you've got these emotions. I mean, if your father dies, your son dies, whatever, there's a sadness. That's not, anything unusual. He goes, no, you perceive the devil's sadness when there's really no reason for it. There's nothing explainable. It just kind of comes on you. It comes on you hard. It comes on you sort of without you really even being able to say, oh, this is why I'm sad. It's just sort of oppressive. So when you do feel those things in your life, know that, yeah, the devil's around you. And then you have to increase, St. Ignatius will talk about this later, some of the other rules, but then, yes, you're going to have to increase the prayer. You're going to have to turn to God because you're going to have to know I'm being assaulted. And so that was something that I had never known. So growing up, Catholic, I had never learned
Yeah.
this sort of telltale sign of the devil. And when the priest told me about it in this retreat I'm on, like a lot of things started making sense to me. Because it's like, whoa, that's been happening to me. There are times. And so now to this day, it still happens to me. It's not like the devil's not around me and he's trying to tempt me. There are times where, this sadness just starts hitting me. And I've now learned to sort of try to step back and identify this. And then it's time to pray. Then it's time to really turn hard to my Lord, to Our Lady, because I need them. I'm under attack. So it's just very helpful for me to have that knowledge and to know that this is one of the signs that he uses to attack me.